Can Islam still serve as a transformative force in today's complex world? In this deep dive based on Chapter 6 of Zafrullah Khan's Islam in the Contemporary World, we explore the call for a new narrative, one that restores Islam's essence as a faith of purpose, justice, and mercy.
Okay, so let's get into this source material. It's a really pointed look, quite critical actually, at the state of the Muslim world today. But it's not just about pointing out problems, right? It actually proposes a very specific way forward, one that the author argues is, well, rooted in getting back to a fundamental understanding of Islam.
That's right. His central argument is, it's quite stark, really. He believes that the decline he sees in many Muslim societies, it comes directly from moving away from kind of forgetting Islam's true essence.
Forgetting the core message.
Exactly. So this whole idea of a new narrative, it's really about reclaiming that original transformative power he argues the faith possesses.
And when he talks about the current state, wow, he doesn't pull any punches at all, does he? He calls the Muslim world one of the most backward communities in the comedy of nations. Mm-hmm. The community of states.
Right, the community of space. But his point is pretty clear. He sees this widespread lack of progress. He says political systems are often primitive or semi-monarchical.
Yeah, and militarily weak and subdued.
Economically destitute and socially almost dysfunctional. It's a heavy assessment.
Absolutely. And he points to things like a widespread lack of respect for human rights, for the rule of law. He notes how societies are often fragmented, sectarian, tribal, and caste-based. It paints a picture of really deep, interconnected problems.
Yeah, and to show just how deep these problems run, he uses this really powerful Persian verse. The translation he gives is, "The whole body has marks all over. On how many places shall I put cotton?"
It's that feeling, isn't it, that the issues are just everywhere, so pervasive.
Yeah.
Where do you even start?
Exactly. But what's interesting is how he moves from describing these symptoms straight to what he sees as the cause.
Right. His conclusion. He says Muslims are fundamentally stuck to the past.
Stuck in the past.
And he puts this down to a lack of real ittihad. Now, that's a really key term here. It means independent reasoning effort, especially in interpreting law or theology.
Ah, okay.
And he argues this lack of real effort, this lack of ittihad, has stopped people from creating a truly Islamic modern existence. His point seems to be that Islam could guide modern life, but only if people actively use their intellect to understand and apply its principles today.
So the core idea is that this stagnation, just being stuck, without that ongoing critical thinking, that ittihad, well, that's what stops communities from flourishing. And maybe connecting that back to you, the listener.
Well, it's a principle that kind of resonates beyond just this specific context, doesn't it? I mean, for individuals, for communities, if you're genuinely stuck, unwilling or unable to engage with now through critical thinking, through adaptation, you just can't reach your potential. You can't build those peaceful, prosperous lives. He's basically arguing this stagnation has had these huge, widespread effects in the Muslim world.
Okay, so that really sets the scene for the problem and its root cause, according to the author. Now let's shift gears and look at what he presents as the ideal, the true Islamic paradigm. He frames it with this really beautiful Quranic verse, 3.191, "Our Lord, not for naught hast thou created all this."
Yes, and for him, that verse is the absolute bedrock of the Islamic worldview. It completely pushes back against any idea of randomness or meaninglessness. It asserts that the universe, life itself, it's all inherently purposive and meaningful, not meaningless and vain.
Right, purposeful.
Yeah.
And the source lists these key elements that flow from that core idea. Like the world has a beginning and an end. It's created by a sovereign God. That's Quran 57.4. The whole universe is subservient to God, Quran 3.83. And this is crucial, humanity is seen as the crown of the creation, God's vicegerent on the earth. That's Quran 95.4 and 2.30.
Vicegerent, that implies being a steward, right? Someone given responsibility on God's behalf.
Exactly.
And what makes this a practical framework, not just, a set of beliefs, is the structure it provides. The author highlights this. Just like there are physical laws running the natural world, he cites Quran 48.23, there's also a code of life and divine guidance for us, for humans.
And the result, the consequence of actually living by this guidance, according to Quran 2.38, it leads to this state where you have neither fear of the future nor regret of the past. I mean, that sounds incredibly freeing.
It really does. But it's important to see this within the author's overall framework of life as a kind of trial. The source really emphasizes that life and death exist precisely to try you to see who of you are best of deed. That's Quran 67.2.
So it's a test.
Yes. And this is where he draws a sharp contrast with just focusing on material progress. He clearly states it's a mistake to see, lots of wealth or resources as the real sign of prestige, because ultimately this world is about being accountable for what you do, your actions.
Okay, so that's the ideal framework he lays out. A purposeful world, humanity with a responsible role, guided by divine law, all leading towards accountability. But then the author takes a hard look at how people have, well, drifted away from this. He talks about groups of people being forgetful and or unaware of this Islamic paradigm. And he identifies, what, three main ways this happens?
Right. Three main groups or types of deviation. The first group, these are people who basically believe life and the universe have no purpose at all. For them, there's no presence of God. They feel they're answerable to none, no accountability after death. They rely only on human intellect, dismissing any divine guidance.
And he says this group actually covers quite a range, from people who are explicitly non-believers, atheists, all the way to what he calls the affluent ruling elite. He describes this elite as being completely obsessed with worldly pursuits, drunk with temporal power that's worldly, temporary power. They're convinced life is just a one-off deal, focused only on pleasure and enjoyment.
He says they believe in hedonism, pursuing pleasure as the main goal, and that high morals are not their concern.
Yeah, and he uses that really striking quote from Babur, the Mughal emperor. Spring festival, spring wine, and a beautiful beloved Babur live luxuriously as the world is only once.
It's quite blunt. The author's point here seems to be that this kind of deviation, whether it's outright atheism or just practical hedonism, it leads to a life cut off from any higher meaning or accountability. Existence just gets reduced to chasing fleeting pleasures.
Okay, that's the first group he identifies. What about the second type of deviation?
The second group, he says, are those who, in practice, believe in many gods.
Many gods, not just like ancient polytheism.
No, not necessarily. He means people who effectively worship or put other things first. Things like power and authority, wealth and property, or even specific people like the peer, a local spiritual figure, or the feudal lord.
Ah, okay. So the gods here are basically anything or anyone you elevate above the one God. Anything you ultimately fear or submit to for worldly reasons.
Precisely. That's the idea. And the author notes that because these people aren't following clear divine guidance, their lives end up full of confusion. Things like debilitating superstitions and slavish habits. They're living on straws of false creeds, fearing many deities.
That sounds quite chaotic.
It does, and here's a pretty significant claim the author makes. He states that the majority of people belong to this group. Now, the source doesn't give us, data to back that up, but it's presented as his assessment. Widespread practical polytheism, essentially.
Wow, that's quite a statement.
The insight seems to be that this deviation leads to a life filled with fear, confusion, and being enslaved to many different masters instead of the freedom found under one God.
That's definitely a challenging idea for us, for the listener, to think about. Okay, and the third group, what's the third way people deviate?
The third group he discusses are those who react to the world by seeing it primarily as full of pain, sorrow, and misery.
Okay, a very negative view.
Yes. For them, the spirit is somehow trapped in the body. Desires, physical comforts, even life itself can be seen as inherently sinful or problematic.
So these are the people who might practice extreme asceticism and renunciation. They withdraw from worldly life, becoming figures like hermits, yogis, and malangs. Individuals who sort of isolate themselves, become detached from the world. He mentions they often just resign themselves to fate instead of actively trying to change things.
Exactly. And his main criticism here is that they've created this false split, this division between the temporal, the worldly, and the spiritual. In doing so, he argues, they effectively abandon what he calls the truly revolutionary teachings of religion, which he believes actually call for engagement with the world, not withdrawal from it.
So it's about engaging, not escaping.
Right. And again, the author makes another broad claim here, noting that the common religious people, in general, belong to this group. So the insight is that this kind of deviation, this extreme asceticism, it disconnects people from the very world Islam, in his view, intends for them to engage with and improve. It leads to passivity.
Right. So the author has laid out the problem, this decline. The cause being suck, lacking that intellectual effort, ijtihad. The ideal, this purposeful paradigm with accountability. And these are three ways people have deviated: hedonism, practical polytheism, and extreme asceticism. Which brings us naturally to the big question he poses. What ought to be done? What's the actual solution?
Well, the first step, the absolute foundation, according to the source, is to really understand and grasp the true spirit of Islam.
Yeah.
You have to do that first in order to develop that correct paradigm he talked about earlier. It's about reconnecting.
Reconnecting with the basics. And he lists a whole series of actions needed for this, doesn't he? It seems to start with internal belief and awareness. Things like ever feel the omnipresence of the Creator.
Be constantly aware of God.
And follow the true teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, PVUH. And crucially, believe in accountability in the life hereafter. It's about getting the core ideology clear in unambiguous terms.
Then it shifts to how that understanding actually plays out in life. The author calls on us to rethink and reconsider the demands that this paradigm makes upon us.
Okay, so think about what it actually requires of you.
Yes. This involves understanding our correct position and status in this universe, remember, as vicegerents, as stewards, and then developing our code of conduct and behavior accordingly. The call is really to imbibe and live by the true spirit of real Islamic thought, to become ideologically oriented and practically responsible individuals.
Responsible individuals. And that means striking a balance, right? He says you should neither indulge in materialism nor shun the necessary comforts of life.
Exactly. It's not about total denial nor about total indulgence. It's finding that middle path guided by purpose.
So it's really about purposeful engagement with the world, not running away from it, but not getting completely lost in it either. And the author really emphasizes the outward actions this should lead to. He says you must work for the betterment of the community by utilizing our personal capabilities.
Yeah, using your talents for good. And the ultimate aim of all this work, it's to seek the pleasure of God in serving humankind.
Serving others as a way of pleasing God.
That act of service is presented as a direct outcome, a direct expression of living according to that correct paradigm. And of course, this explicitly means turning away from those deviations we discussed earlier.
Right. He says to shun hedonism and the worship of many gods. Make sure you're submitting only to the one God.
And also avoiding those unnecessary ascetic practices. Don't withdraw excessively.
Okay. And he wraps up this whole section with a quote from the philosopher-poet Iqbal. The source gives the original Urdu, but the context suggests the meaning is captured in this simple phrase, "This gives a real freedom."
It's a really powerful thought to end on, isn't it? The author is essentially arguing that this path, this purposeful, balanced, responsible engagement with the world, all guided by understanding the true Islamic paradigm, this isn't about restriction at all. It is, in fact, the very path to achieving genuine freedom.
So just to kind of wrap up this deep dive into Zafarullah Khan's chapter, he's presenting a really strong case here. He argues that the challenges he sees in the Muslim world today, they stem from moving away from Islam's foundational purpose and what that core paradigm really asks people. And the way forward, the solution he's proposing, well, it isn't found in just being rigidly stuck in past interpretations, nor is it found in just giving in to worldly excess or worshiping other things or people, or completely withdrawing into extreme detachment.
Exactly. The call is for this new narrative, as he terms it. And that narrative means rediscovering and actually living by Islam's true spirit, its essence of purpose. It means actively embracing accountability, finding that crucial balance between, the worldly and the spiritual aspects of life, and practically, actively working for the good of humanity. It's about reclaiming the faith as a dynamic, truly transformative force in the world today.
Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe something for you to consider. If, as the author suggests, this responsible, purposeful engagement with the world is where real freedom actually lies, then what aspects of modern life, or perhaps even certain traditional practices we might hold on to, might actually be holding individuals or even whole communities back from finding and realizing that kind of freedom? Something we're thinking about.